Well, today, guys, is a long time in coming, and I just got to thank God because through all things, I can't do anything without God. It says in Philippians that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Me, I'm a chicken shit. Sorry. I fear when I'm standing up here in front of a microphone talking because I might say the wrong thing or I stumble over my words. And I wasn't focused the first time that I came up here and shared my testimony because I was focused on the fear and not on God. And so I've gotten a lot of good advice over the last 2 weeks since God, well, first of all, this wasn't my choosing. This was all God. 2 weeks ago, I was getting ready to come into the church, and Pastor Bill was unlocking the door and let me in, and he turned around and he goes, Missy, God has called you to teach. He said that I have a voice. I have his voice, and that there are so many things that he has taught me that he wants me to share with you guys. And so I said, that's kind of funny, Pastor Bill, because the very first time I met you, you gave me the same exact prophecy, that my calling in life was to teach. 10 minutes after I met Bill, his wife Denise gave me the same exact prophecy. So for me, I feel like the last year of my life, I've been like Jonah, who ran from God. Jonah had a message to give to Nineveh, and Jonah didn't want no part of going to Nineveh. Jonah ended up in the belly of a whale because God said, you're going to go to Nineveh. And so I feel like that's where my life has been the last few years, is me not really running from God, but maybe avoiding him a little out of fear because I was afraid. And so I know now that, through all things, that God can even give me peace in the message that he has for you guys. And so today I want to talk to you about my testimony because it says in the book of Revelations that we can overcome anything through the blood of the Lamb and the word of his testimony. And my testimony is this: I would not be alive today if it was not for Jesus Christ in my life. And not only did God do this for me because he loved me, but he did this through every single one of you guys. Every single one of you guys I've learned something from. Lorraine, what you've done with children just blows my mind. And the way that he introduced me to you through the class. Gary had this school he invited me to. This is when I'm still a pretty new Christian. And I was very interested in the supernatural. And so he had this school called the Quad City School of Supernatural Ministry. And the very first night we're there, we're introducing ourselves. And I see this woman sitting there, and she looks so familiar. And I'm like, where do I know her from, God? Well, the minute she opened her mouth, God reminded me. Lorraine took care of my kids when I lost my kids. She was a foster mom to my babies. And not just mine, but 50 others. I mean, how could I arrange something like that? That could have only come from God. The things that I've learned from Karen about praying and about opening up your heart for others, even when it makes things difficult in your life, to make things better for somebody else. And Therese, everything that Therese and Merle have went through since they've lost Rachel, and the way that they've lived their lives, that's a tribute to me on how to live my life. And I mean, there's so many other things. Chris was another one of our members of our church, or of our school. Your heart for worship and your heart for God, I see that. And I love that so much. And so when God spoke to me about the message today, the message was about me and my testimony, but it was more about you guys and what you guys have brought to me and all the teachers along the way who have taught me not just about God, but how to live and how to walk in it and how to have faith and how to trust and how to give those problems that I have to God. And so, like I said, it's not just about me. It's about you guys too, and how important it is that as we walk out our daily lives, the people that we meet and the things that we say and the things that we do, you may not know the impact that you have on somebody else. But the impact that you guys have had on me it far outweighs it. When I was growing up, I didn't have God in my life. I knew a little bit about who Jesus was by stories that my grandma told and my Aunt Max told, but I didn't go to church. I didn't have any kind. My testimony, not yours. I love you, Mom. And if anybody knows my family, we don't shut up. That's just a given. And so, as I became a little bit older, a friend of mine had introduced me to this church, and she said, why don't you come try this vacation Bible study? So that gave me a little nibble. I met some people. They were very friendly, but I still didn't know who this God was. And so I went along my way. I'm living my life. And then I'm about, 13? And I got invited to this vacation Bible study at the park. And it was hosted by a woman named Suzanne and Bill Summers. And they were from a little town in the very southern tip of Illinois called Metropolis. And they came up for 2 weeks. I think they had like a retreat or something or a convention that they were part of. And during the summer, they wanted to do a vacation Bible study in the park. And so they're the ones who first really taught me about who Jesus was and about forgiveness and about these things that I had no idea. I didn't know that God loved me. I didn't know I had a plan and purpose for my life. I didn't know anything about that. And so they're the ones that really taught me. And I turned my life over to God, not even knowing who this God was, but trusting in him. And so they would come for 2 weeks in the summer, and this went on for about 3 years. Well, life happens, and I met my ex-husband, and at 16 years old, I became a mom. And I forgot about this God that I had prayed to, this God that I loved, that was supposed to take care of me, and all of these things, because I really didn't have a support system. I didn't have people like you guys to encourage me, to teach me, to lead me on. And so my decisions and my life brought me to a completely different place. And I believe all that I walked through, without that, I wouldn't be who I am today. With all that pain and all the struggle and all the strife and everything that I've lived through, if I hadn't walked through all that, I wouldn't be able to stand here and tell you today exactly what God did in my life. I lived through abuse. I lived through drug addiction. I lived through a great depression, which ultimately is the reason I lost my kids. I didn't know that I could give all of these things to God. I didn't have this God to come in and rescue me because I didn't even know who he was. And so through all of my bad decisions and all the things that I'd done, I ended up in jail. And I think that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, was landing in jail. Because that was the time that God said, you can't go nowhere. You can't do anything. Now I'm going to get to you. And so I first started out here in the Scott County Jail. I was there for about a week, and they're like, well, we're overcrowded. We're going to send you out of county. We're going to send you up to Lynn County Jail. And I'm like, well, my family can't visit me up there because it's too far away. And I'm all worried about these things. And at that point in time, I had been on quite a few medications for depression and anxiety and these other things. And so when they transferred me, I had no medication. I went through about a week of suicidal thoughts, which are something that plagued me for a long time. I mean, after losing my kids, I didn't want to live. I ended up in the hospital, 3 or 4 suicide attempts, because I didn't have God to rely on. I didn't know what to do. I thought I had lost my mind. So I'm sitting in jail, and I have nothing to turn to, and they send me out of state, or out of county, and I'm in this jail with a whole bunch of people, of course, that I don't know. And the very bunk that they put me on, it's a 2-tier bunk, and we're in this room, and there's probably 10 bunks with 2 women on each one. And they put me up on this top bunk, and on the bottom bunk is this little old lady from India. And she tells me her story. She's being deported back to India. She had run away because she had been abused. And she was a devout Catholic. They called her Mother Teresa. And so the night that I was plagued really bad with these suicide, I had actually thought about seriously taking my life that night. She prayed with me. And she said, I can't see you go through this and not offer you prayer. And she talked to me that night and told me about this God in a way that nobody else had ever. She's like, you don't have to struggle. You don't have to be afraid. You do not have to live like this. And she talked to me and she prayed with me. And I don't know, I went to sleep that night still confused, still worried. But when I woke up the next day, we went and we had our lunch, and they brought it in, and sitting there on my tray is this egg salad sandwich. To me, and anybody else, it's just an egg salad sandwich. But to me, that was God showing me that he loved me, because my very favorite thing in the world was egg salad sandwiches. And that is the very first time that I believed that God loved me and that God was there. And so that week, we had a Bible study group that came in. And I was like, okay, God loves me. Let's see what he has. I'm gonna seek him, And so the Bible study group came in, and they shared with me this book. It's called A Purpose-Driven Life. This book changed my life. This book taught me that it wasn't all about me, that there was this God up there that loved me, knew me from the minute I was conceived, and had this plan and this purpose for my life. Even though that I didn't know I had a plan and a purpose for my life, God did. And so I read every single word of this. I started to teach every single word of this to the girls that came in that didn't know about it. And even after I think I was at Lynn County Jail for about a month, and they brought me back down to Scott County. I continued a Bible study out in the recreation area with this book, and we sang worship songs, the ones that they had given us. We still had the lyrics and everything, and so we would have a 1-hour Bible study, and then when we go back to our cell, we would still be talking about it and still reading it. And so finally, they brought me my own Bible. This thing is falling apart. It's missing pages. It's missing its cover. But I've read every single word of this. Every single word of this. This helped change my life. I think even more than that book did. This is the Word of God. And so I started to discover who he was. And I read about how if I seek God with all of my heart and all my soul and all my mind and all my strength, that he would start to take care of me. And he would do the things that I didn't know that he could do. And so he did that. And not just through me, but through the people that I prayed for. I started to see changes in them as well, and not just myself. And so this whole time that I was in jail, I met this woman named Janet Wolf, who is a beautiful person. She helps rescue people who have been through domestic violence and through all kinds of struggles, jail, you name it. And so when it was time for me to get out of jail, she helped me get into a transitional housing program. She invited me to this church called Heritage Church in Rock Island, where I was baptized in the Rock River. And that experience, just blew me away. 75 people, I think, that day got baptized. And I had never experienced anything like that, because I didn't know that there was this big family of people that God had, and that this big family of people that he had waiting for me. I didn't know that back then. And so after I got out of jail, I didn't have a big support system again. And I ended up drifting away again. Even though knowing that God loved me and he had this plan and this purpose for my life. Well, I just went back to my old life because it was so comfortable. It was like putting on your old t-shirt and jeans. And I went back to my friends, and I went back to doing the things that I did. And I went back to the people that I knew because it was comfortable. Instead of seeking God, I was back to seeking my own life. And along that time, right after I got out of jail, I ran into Paul. Well, I had known Paul before because I had dated Paul before. When I was a teenager, me and Paul dated for 2 or 3 years, off and on. And we were neither one of us grown up enough or responsible enough to be in a kind of relationship like that. But Paul had come back into my life, and we started to date again. And we decided that we were going to get married. And I think we were like playing house at this point in time. Because neither one of us were responsible. We couldn't keep a steady job or pay our bills. And eventually we ended up homeless. For 2.5 years, we lived in a van. We lived in a house that my friend owned that had no electricity, no walls, no plumbing, no wiring, no nothing. We had a solar light to light our room, but it was a roof over our head. So we were just thankful. And during that whole time, it was a struggle. We lost everything we knew, but it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to us. Because during that point in time, we had to rely on God. And I turned my life around after I tried to kill myself again. I woke up in a hospital in Trinity, and what was it, Moline, Amy? Was it Rock Island or Moline? I couldn't remember. All right. I had a really bad day at work, and my boss called me names. The employees were laughing and making jokes about me, and finally I had enough. I walked out the door. I took 2 pills and shoved them down, 2 bottles of pills and shoved them down my throat. I was like, I am done. I said, God, the only way out of this is if you decide this is it. And so I woke up in that hospital bed. And the minute I woke up, I knew. I was like, there's only one reason why I'm still here. And that's because God loves me. And that's because God saved me. And God loved me enough. And God knew that I wasn't done. God knew that I had a voice for everyone to hear. And so from that day on, I started to seek him. It says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be given unto you. So I quit my job because it was an abusive situation. You can ask Amy. Amy worked there. It was an abusive situation. So homeless. I make $10 an hour. I quit my job because that's what God showed me. But during the next 6 months, year, every single thing that I needed in that time, God provided for. He said, don't worry. Do not worry about anything. So I didn't. But I gave thanks for all things, even the bad stuff that was going down at the time. All of that I gave thanks for because God said to. It says in, 1 Thessalonians, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks for all things. Not just the good stuff, but the bad stuff, because the bad stuff helps shape us and build us and grow us and make us appreciate it when God does bless us with those good things. And so I did that. I walked that out in my life. Not just me, but Paul as well. We got to a point where we almost divorced during that time while we were homeless. We separated for a week. He went and stayed with his mom, and I went and stayed with some friends of ours. And it was probably one of the worst weeks of my life. It really was. Because if anybody that knows me and Paul, we're like peanut butter and jelly. You can't have one without the other. And so we did what we could to change our marriage and to help things along. My friend invited me to this church. It used to meet upstairs, and it was called Christ First Ministries. And the week I got out of church, I got in contact with this girl, and she's like, yeah, there's this church that meets at the coffee shop now. Well, I've been part of this coffee shop before we were homeless and all of those things happened. I met Joe and Lydia. And so I was led back here by what I believe was God. And so I went upstairs, and the very first day I sit down, sitting in front of me are these 2 magnets on the wall, and it says suicide prevention. Seriously. And that was my sign from God, like, this is exactly where I need to be. And so I did. Every single week I was here. Anybody that knows me knows I keep a notebook. I'm always doodling, or I'm always taking notes for everything. And so I began to learn about who God was and take in everything that I could, because that's what I believed that he wanted. he said, seek me, and all these things will be given unto you. So I did seek him in every single way that I could. He brought some brilliant teachers to me. Pastor Brandon and Danielle, they had the heart for praise and worship like you would not believe. They would get down with their family and worship like no other. And it brought out this joy in me to be able to worship so freely like that. And Gary, who taught me about the supernatural. And Gary Jones, who taught me about his struggles when he walked through a lot of the similar things, going to jail and not believing in God. But, you know, Catherine, your heart for just wanting everyone to know who Jesus is and what you do through High Praise Unlimited, I thank you for that, because seeing what you walk through and your faith and your trust in God helps me in my daily life trust in him for the things that he wants me to do, which is teach. Even though I didn't believe in myself, God believed in me. And so the fear and the things that kept me from being up here and talking are things that I could overcome. I just didn't want to at the time. And maybe it wasn't even my decision. Some of that might have been just God's timing, because right now, this is what he wants. And each day, I have to get up and believe that he's going to lead me, and he's going to guide my footsteps. He's going to guide my heart. He's going to guide my mouth. And he's going to give the message to me that I have to give to you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Because that's God. He will work through us if we let him. But we can stop him if we choose to, because he's a gentleman. He's not going to intrude, and he's not going to force us to do something we don't want to do. But in my heart, I believe that we all have the ability to shine the light of God, even when we're not even conscious that we're doing it, because it's who we are. It's how God created us. He created us to love, because he is love. If God is love and God created me, I have to be loved too. And that's how I try to live my life. You know, God will give me a way to love Phil, and God gives me a way to love Amy, and God gives me a way to love Gary and Lorraine and Kristen, and especially Paul. God loves to love Paul through me. He really does. He loves to bless him and love him through me. And you guys can do the same thing with the people that he brings to you. Not just in your daily lives as you're out and about and going to your job and everything, while you're here at the church. There are so many things that you can do to show God's love towards another person. And not even be conscious of it, because it's just who you are. And that was my struggle for a while, was, am I doing this right, God? Am I walking this out right? Am I living my life the way that you want me to? And I remember something that he taught me from the beginning. He said, just be the best you that you could be. Keep seeking me. Keep learning about me. Keep taking in everything that you can, because it will come out. When we plant the seeds, God will water them. He will fertilize them, and he will grow them. And though it starts out so small, like an avalanche, it starts out with one snowflake, and it turns into something huge. And God will do that in our hearts too. All I had was this egg salad sandwich. And God grew that. And so looking back now at everything that I've been through and how hard that I made it, because I didn't cooperate with what God had told me from the beginning, which was that he loved me and he would take care of me, and that I just had to believe. And so I think for me, everything that he's done up until this point has been very important. But the last 4 years especially, what we've done down here at the sanctuary, and being able to serve you guys. And even on the days when I don't want to get out of bed because I worked until 2 o'clock in the morning. Even on the days where the Broncos are playing the Vikings. Like, really, I want to sit at home on the couch and watch a football game sometimes. But I don't, because God has called me to love you guys, to help here, to serve. And so that way you guys don't have to worry about making coffee, because you got me. You guys can fellowship and love on each other while I do those things. And it's not that I'm missing out on anything, because There's so many things that God has been able to bless me. And all of the things that I've seen what God has done in all of your lives. Deb, what he's done through you in that book and the impact that you've had on the Jewish culture and everything, I love that. That's not my calling. That's yours. Dee Dee, your heart for prayer. I mean, Dee Dee invited me to the Quad City Prayer Center, and we had this prayer group. And I know the last few months I've been a little busy with work and everything, but I got the opportunity to pray for people that I didn't even know. This little boy named Liam got this disease, this mysterious rare disease, and they didn't think he was going to live in 24 hours past when he's alive and he's well. And just seeing what God did through that little boy just blows my mind. Havilah, your heart for worship and your voice, it just cuts through everything. It's like the minute you open your mouth, I just want to stop and listen. Seriously. That's not my gift. That's yours. Let's see. Phil. I mean, your family, the family that you guys raised, it's so beautiful. And I love what God has done through you. And getting to know Barb. I mean, I loved Barb so much. Even though I didn't know her for very long, I felt like I'd known her my whole entire life. Because she was that type of person that would just take you in and love on you. And so it's like the impact that you guys have had on my life is just as important as the impact as God has had on my life in a very personal way. And I want to carry that on for the rest of my life. There is no going back for me this time. There is no running away from God, because it doesn't matter how far I run, he's going to catch up to me. He's going to swallow me up with a whale, and he's going to bring me back, because this is where I belong. I belong in his family. And even though I love my natural family, the family that God has brought me is like, I mean, yeah, awesome is the only word I can describe, because on a daily basis, God blows my mind. Little things. Gary knows about this dime thing. Gary taught me, or told me this story one time about how God likes to leave pennies for him. And how he was golfing one day, and he looked down, and in the divot was a penny. And I was like, God, you're so funny to do things like that. And so all of a sudden, I start getting these dimes that pop up everywhere. And I'm like, what's up with the dimes? I mean, like, we're talking like 10 or 15 a day. And it's crazy. And so my good friend Janine, I'm over at her house one day, and her mom, and I'm explaining this to her mom, and her mom's like, oh my goodness, my Bible study last night, we were learning about the spiritual symbolism between numbers. And she's like, we just learned last night that the number 10 symbolizes testimony. And so for the last 2 weeks, the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe the last month or so, these dimes have been coming in. I got a change jar that I started because I have so much change now that, and in the weirdest places. Oh my goodness. And so God knows I get a chuckle out of little things. And when he surprises me like that, which he never fails to do. And so this morning, I'm getting ready to share my testimony, and I get out of the shower, and I'm sitting on my bed, and I got my Bible open, and lo and behold, I hear this cooing, and I look out my window, and there's 2 doves in my windowsill. Well, we all know that the dove, it not only symbolizes peace, but when Jesus was baptized, the Holy Spirit came down on him like a dove. And that was my peace this morning. That was to show me that no matter what I'm fearing up here, that there's no need to fear because he's here. He's here in you and in you and in you, Gary. And the work that you do with the homeless. Like, obviously I tried to help you out and got afraid in front of a camera. 2 of them, they interviewed me for the news, and I did share my testimony with them, but the way the news is, they kind of cut everything that I had to say about God out of it. So it kind of just made me look stupid. No, it made me kind of look silly. It really did. Oh, Tony, the work that you guys do with the homeless, serving down at King's Harvest, I applaud you on that. I really do. I don't have the time for it right now, but at a certain point in time when I was unemployed, I would just go down there, and they wouldn't let me volunteer because I have a felony on my record. However, I would sit down there and intercede for everybody, and they just didn't know it. They would tell me their problems, and I would pray over them. I would go home and pray about them for an hour. And seeing the people that I did pray for, they disappeared because they ended up getting jobs. And they ended up moving into apartments, and then I didn't see them anymore. And so the impact that we have in what God has given us, that's what I love. I love to see when I pray for something and what God can do, because I can't do anything on my own. I can only do what I do through Christ. Because on my own, I'm back to the person that was sitting in jail, or I'm in the hospital, in the mental unit, on all kinds of drugs, because that's just who I was. But with him, I'm able to do these things because of him. And so this morning, Chris is getting ready to practice her worship. I didn't even know she was going to play Amazing Grace today. And the minute that came out, it made me bawl, because that's the story of my life. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.